let's discuss the 1935-1936 season. That's right, boys and girls. I'm home. The series is back. The series took a break while I was gone because the hockey encyclopedias I used for this series are kind of heavy, and I didn't feel like carrying them on top of all the other equipment and jerseys I was bringing with me to Vegas. So that's why the series, and also the boards. Can you imagine me trying to get this through TSA or onto a plane? I'm not paying $50 to put this on a plane. All right. This was an interesting season, and we're still in an era where there's 8 teams. 6 of them are going to survive, and it's not a spoiler for me to tell you it's not going to be the New York Americans and Montreal Maroons. Despite the fact that Maroons are already at the season's beginning really, really struggling, it doesn't affect whether or not the Maroons are still a winning team, which it did with Ottawa, who became St. Louis, and this season the NHL dispersed the roster of the St. Louis Eagles. And what happened was the NHL bought those players for $35,000 and then sold them to the other teams in the NHL. Now imagine that. Imagine any NHL team going out of business right now. The NHL buying those players and then selling them to other teams in the league. Oh, that would get ugly. Montreal led the way in the Canadian division at 22-16-10, followed by Toronto at 23-19-6. New York Americans were next at 16-25-7, and then the Montreal Canadiens, who were sold that year. So they switched owners because they were really struggling. 11-26-11. So the proud, wonderful Montreal Canadiens were going to have to wait to become those proud Montreal Canadiens, and thankfully survived because, both Montreal teams were having some issues at this point. In the American division, it's all roses. Detroit 24-16-8, Boston 22-20-6, Chicago 21-19-8, and the New York Rangers 19-17-12. Notice, every single team in the American division is above 500. It is the first time that happened. Remember, there are no 3-point games at this point in the NHL, so they're all legitimately above 500. 1936, March 24th, the longest game in NHL history is played. It is played in this series. Normie Smith got a 92 save shutout. 92. I was going to go with Norm Smith, but since it says Normie in all the books I read, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll use Normie. And yeah, his shutout was fantastic because he followed it up with another one, but we'll get to that. The Hart Trophy goes to Eddie Shore of the Bruins. I've talked about him. The Calder goes to Mike Caracas of the Chicago Blackhawks. The Vezina, which is lowest goals against, goes to Tiny Thompson of Boston. The Bing goes to Doc Romneys of the Chicago Blackhawks. So there you go. And Blackhawks at this point is 2 words. Blackhawks became 1 word late in the 80s. Threw me off. Because I was so used to being 2, and I'm like, wait, why did they make it 1? But you'd have to ask Bill Wirtz, and you can't. I always thought it looked better as 2 words. I'm not going to start a debate over something stupid. That's not like me. It kind of is. So again, playoff format. I feel like I need to explain it again. It's been about a week since I did a video on this. The top 2 teams in each division play against each other, and the winner will go to the Stanley Cup Final. Then 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, and those teams will decide amongst themselves who gets to play in the Stanley Cup Final against Detroit and Montreal. Detroit beats the Maroons, as I said, in 6 overtimes, 1-0. They then win Game 2, 3-0, meaning Normie Smith went 9 periods of no goals against. He allowed 1 in Game 3, which they won 2-1, which means Normie Smith had a 0.2 goals against average in that series. They weren't using beach balls, they were using pucks, and he had a goals against of 0.2. I don't know what his save percentage was, but with 92 saves in Game 1, I'm going to guess it was higher than 950. Just on a limb there. And then in Series B, C, and B and C is total goals. Series D, the semifinals, is actually a series now, not based on total goals. Boston wins Game 1 3-0 in Series B, but Toronto wins the next game 8-3. So they win a total goals series 8-6. The New York Americans win 3-1 in Game 1 of their series. They lost game 2 5-4, but they win total goals 7-5. So what's interesting is the Americans and the Maple Leafs knock out Boston and Chicago. So the Canadian division was weaker during the season, but the Canadian division is stronger in the playoffs. In Series D, which is what we would call a semi-final or a conference championship now, Toronto wins game 1 3-1. The Americans win game 2 1-0. Toronto wins game 3 3-1. The Toronto Maple Leafs win the series 2-1. In the Stanley Cup final, which is still a best of 5 at this stage of the game, Detroit wins game 1 3-1. So remember Normie Smith? Yeah, he's now allowed 2 goals in 4 games. Game 2 is crazy. And this is the real score. 9-4 for Detroit. 9 goals scored by Detroit sets a record for a playoff game. Toronto wins game 3 to stave off elimination, 4-3 in overtime. But Detroit wins 3-2 in game 4 and wins the series in 4. So the Detroit Red Wings are the Stanley Cup winners of 1936. But we're getting closer to that original 6 era. It's coming. It's getting there. The Maroons and the Americans both kind of struggling, and those struggles are not going to get better for them. Again, I'm not telling you guys a story you don't already know because those teams no longer exist. So we're getting to that point. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And this is your 1936 history lesson for today. And your winners, Detroit. I'll talk to you again soon.